So I intend to speak about Macdonald's sabbatical in Egypt in 1908. And as you know, next slide please, as you know, Egypt is à la belle époque, it's the golden age of traveling, of touring the Middle East. No, just okay. Before. Yeah. So it's the golden age of touring the Middle East, principally with the help of cooks and so on that are organizing tourist trips not only in Egypt but in Palestine and in the rest of the Ottoman Empire. Since Napoleon invaded Egypt at the beginning of the 19th century, Egypt has become a place about which everybody dreams. Like, for example, the painter Le Comte de Louis in this wonderful painting called The Dream of the Eunuch. So the eunuch dreams of a woman, and he dreams of other things as well, which is less enjoyable than a woman, but it all takes place in Cairo, because Cairo is the place where indeed you can orientalize and live the Arabian Nights better than anywhere else. And one wonder why exactly Macdonald wanted to go to Egypt for his sabbatical. 1 year before him, we had one of the most famous French writers called Pierre Loti, who had been in Egypt at the invitation of the nationalist young Egyptian Muslim leader Mustafa Kemal Pasha. And Loti hated the British occupation of Egypt and spoke of the death of Philae, that island famous for its pharaonic temple, but it was the death of Egypt, of traditional Islamic Egypt under the rule of the British. Cairo was becoming far too, I would say, westernized. The main symbol of westernization was the ultra-famous Shepherd Hotel in Cairo, which was burned when Egypt went through its revolution in 1952 with Nasser. It was the symbol of European presence in Egypt. Loti and Macdonald himself indeed preferred old Cairo, the old Islamic Cairo. And that's what Macdonald was after, the city of the Arabian Nights. And the city of the Arabian Nights, like the rest of the country, was under the rule of the dynasty of Muhammad Ali. In the beginning of the 20th century, the ruler was Abbas Hilmi II, and you had an Egyptian government, but things were more complex than that, because Abbas Hilmi could be the Khedive, but the real government was coming from the British embassy, represented by the Earl of Cromer. We will have to leave Egypt just before Macdonald arrives in 1907. Cromer will be called back to London, and he will publish his 2 volumes of Modern Egypt in 1908, when Macdonald will be in Egypt. And the British presence in Egypt had led to some movement of reformism among the Muslim intelligentsia, represented here by Sheikh Mohammed Abdou, but also had still much nationalistic revendications represented by Mustafa Kemal Pasha. And Mustafa Kemal Pasha will die at the age of 32 while Macdonald is in Cairo. And Macdonald will speak of Mustafa Kemal Pasha in his diary. But things are even more complex than that. You don't have only the Egyptian Khedive or the British Egypt, Egypt is still part of the Ottoman Empire, which is then ruled by Sultan Abdul Hamid. He has been on the Ottoman throne since 1876. And in 1908, he will have to face a revolution, the revolution of the Young Turks, which will take place in July 1908, exactly when Macdonald is traveling in the Ottoman Empire. He leaves Palestine, goes to Syria, and then to Constantinople. So very interesting times taking place in the Middle East when he arrives in Port Said by ship from England in November 1907. As a British citizen, one of the first things he will do in Cairo is to get his certificate of registration with the British Embassy. You can see the original on one of the tables of the exhibition. And that means that although Scot, he belongs to the, I would say, colonial imperialist rulers class when he comes to Egypt. But when he will want to travel outside of Egypt towards Palestine and Syria, he will need to have an Ottoman passport written in French and in Ottoman Turkish. The name of his wife is mentioned on the reverse. So, very interesting complexity in the Middle East. And it is in British-occupied Egypt, which is still part of the Ottoman Empire, that he will indeed travel. So he arrives to Port Said by ship from England. He goes from Port Said by train to Cairo. He stays in Cairo from November 07 to June 08. Then he travels back by train to Port Said, then by ship to Jaffa in Palestine, by train from Jaffa to Jerusalem. Then he tours Palestine by car, visiting cities like Acre and Tiberias. He will then cross the lake of Tiberias. He will sail the lake to the south of the lake, where he will take the train to Damascus. And from Damascus, he will go to Baalbek, and then Beirut by car, then sail from Beirut to Constantinople, and from Constantinople take the Orient Express back to Europe. So a long trip. And how do we know about that trip? Through various letters, but mainly through his diary. He indeed writes a diary. You have it in the exhibition in one of the showcases. And the diary is very strange because it's mostly about Cairo. Although he stays in Jerusalem, you have seen, for 2 weeks, and then Constantinople. When we come to that part of the diary, there are just a few words. For Cairo, the diary can be very long sometimes, 1 page for each day. That's the 1st January 1908. And I tell you, the script, the way he writes, is not that easy to read. But we have those documents. Where do they live in Cairo? He and his wife, after trying a few hotels, they have settled in Pension des Familles, as it's far less expensive than the Shepherd. And we have there one of the most, the nicest photos that he has taken of his wife, sick célibat, he wrote on the reverse, and so she was sitting. With his wife, he stays mainly in Cairo. You would have thought, you would have expected that this Macdonald, who had studied hieroglyphics in Berlin and in London, would have been interested going down the Nile to Luxor and Aswan. They had thought about it at some point, but then they decided not to go south because some troubles that were taking place there, and so most of their time will be spent in Cairo. And we can look at one day, a short diary comment about one day, and see what he does usually in Cairo. This is very typical of the way he uses his time. He reads the Muqaddam, which is an Arabic journal, because he tries to learn spoken Arabic. He has great difficulties with the colloquial Egyptian. So he reads the Muqaddam in the morning, and then with Yahya M, he reads the Muqaddam. Another thing, Yahya M is a Christian Copt. He has another student called Mikhail Mansour, who is a Muslim convert to Christianity, Protestantism, who is also helping him learning colloquial Arabic or the newspaper Arabic. He also needs the help of those students to understand a letter like the one sent to him by Amin al-Mas'ad. On that day, he received it. We have it downstairs, or it's on the table of the exhibition. And very interestingly, he asked his Egyptian student, can you help me understanding exactly when we have to use Salam Alaikum and with whom? Because the letter sent by this Muslim says, Sidi al-Fadil, Tahiyya wa Salam. It's not a Salam Alaikum, so he's puzzled. When do you use Salam Alaikum? Do you use it with Christians, Muslims, or non-Muslims, etc.? So it's not just learning the language, it's learning the culture as well. Afternoon at the Museum of Islamic Art, then called the Arab Museum, meeting the director of the Islamic Art Museum, and also visiting it with the help of Hertz, who was the Jewish Austrian director of the Ministry of Antiquities at the time. Then dinner, usually there is tea in the pension, meeting with different people, in this case with some Mr. Watson, who is involved in the missionary movement in Cairo about evangelistic questions and religious Christian Sunday school, and then they have tea, dealing with letters, and we know exactly when he writes his letters, because he always writes in his diary that he received letters or that he sent some. So that's a typical day learning Arabic. We can then see that his learning Arabic is sometimes very basic. There he tries to write a letter answering some Muslim who has written to him. You have signature Duncan B. Macdonald, but as you see, it's not easy for him to write current modern Arabic. He finds himself far more at home with classical texts of theologians like al-Ghazali or others. So, apart from learning Arabic, what does he do? He buys books. He buys books for himself and for the seminary. What kind of books? Very academic books like dictionaries, but also, of course, qisas, stories relating directly or indirectly to the Arabian Nights, and also every possible little booklet of occultism, magic, folklore, all the aspects that you would not expect a proper academic to deal with. But he is very interested in every kind of popular phenomenon of religiosity. Very interestingly here, his bookseller in Cairo is Yehuda. Yehuda, who is a Jewish bookseller in Cairo, who does a very good job. And as you see, it's addressed to the Professor Macdonald in German, then it is in Arabic, then it is in French. We have then a cosmopolitan reality, which unfortunately we don't find anymore very often in the Middle East. But two nice stories about this Yehuda. We have no photo of Yehuda, but we have a photo made by Macdonald of his wife and of his baby. Here. Because on this day, the April 26th, he writes in his diary, went to see Yehuda but found him out, photo of mother and baby there. And among his photographs, we have this photo of a Jewish woman and child, Cairo. It's, of course, Madame Yehuda and the baby. That's the first nice story. And you can see the original on one of the tables. Then the second nice anecdote is that after Macdonald has come back to Hartford, Yehuda still sends him books. And he sends him this wonderful edition of a fascicle of the Arabian Nights in Arabic. The language is Arabic, but written in Hebrew fonts, in Hebrew characters. And again, it's a mixture of everything. It was published in Algeria, Oran, in 1882, but it starts by Histoire de Elf Leila wa Leila bil Arabiyya, and then it's first livraison, you have it over there. So again, it's a mixture of Italian, French, Hebrew, and Arabic. It's one of the nicest copies of Elf Leila wa Leila that we have here, and of course it's sent by Yehuda after Macdonald has left Cairo, and we have the bill paid by Hartford Seminary. Elf Leila in Jude for Jewish, Moroccan, from Oran, and it costs 10 francs, because that's the dollar, is not the monetary standard then, but it's the French franc. Apart from buying books, he is of course still involved in his Christian activities as a missionary. He prays or he worships on Sundays in different places, the Scottish Church or the All Saints Church, that's one of his photographs, or also at the American Mission. And he's involved trying to, nothing new, trying to get students to Hartford Seminary. And trying to convince the CMS, Church Missionary Society of London, to send some of their missionaries for training in Hartford. And that's how came, as was said earlier on by Jim Smith, came to study with him in Hartford at some point. The same Gainer about whom he said at some point, oh, he was a failure, but also, and that's probably the most important, after studying with Macdonald, he had passed from controversy to persuasion in his relation with Muslims. He was coming, demanding strong arguments against Islam, but he went through this evolution by studying with Macdonald himself. Macdonald also meets very important people. A few of you among you probably know Yahya M, who was a novelist, journalist, and one of the most emblematic Christian Arab modernist writers at the beginning of the 20th century. Director of famous journal Al-Hilal, the Crescent in Cairo, Lebanese by origin, Protestant by religion. And Macdonald will have quite a few meetings with him in Cairo. We have a few letters by Yahya M in the archives, and they should be published at some point. So he operates or he evolves in very high spheres, which is also confirmed by his meetings with this other guy. This other guy, Yahya Pasha, is a Catholic, listen to this, Catholic, Armenian, Egyptian, Ottoman Minister of Culture. Okay? So again, very typical of the cosmopolitan reality of colonial Egypt at the beginning of the 20th century. And Macdonald will be invited by Aten Pasha because they have a similar interest for folklore and popular stories. And Aten Pasha, as Minister of Culture in Egypt, published also very important studies on Egyptian folklore and Mamluk heraldry, among other things. And he will be invited even to the home of Aten Pasha, as we have this photograph of the garden of the home of Aten Pasha. And also, on the other side, many photos of gardens of Cairo. And this one is interesting because you see that he is there with a few effendiyat, a few Muslim effendis, and also religious scholars. It's one of the parts around Cairo. And indeed, Macdonald doesn't just remain in the colonial circles of the Brits or anti-government of the Khedive, but has real contacts with the Muslim authorities. He will be received by the Sheikh al-Azhar, about whom he writes this in his diary. A kindly old man, but quite old-fashioned, but who is interested in this American who tries to speak Arabic, and he is especially interested in the Arabian Nights, and who is then told, okay, go and see the librarian of Al-Azhar and see if we have any manuscript of the Arabian Nights there. We have no photo by Macdonald of the Sheikh al-Azhar, but we have a photo of an Azhari student, which he took in another mosque than Al-Azhar, the mosque of El-Muayyad. You see Hamid Musa, an Azhar student, and an unknown old man with a jolly nose in the court of the mosque of El-Muayyad. Macdonald has a lot of humor. So he is very interested in meeting people. He loves it. And he goes all around Cairo, not only to visit Islamic monuments, but to meet people. That's a map of Cairo of the beginning of the 20th century. He lives where you have this violet dot on Place del Nil, and I've tried to put blue dots for the places where he took photographs. And there are many places for which we have photographs taken by him that are outside of Cairo. So, as you see, he goes really everywhere around Cairo. And he takes photos. This whole thing, he started with the fact that the library director, Steve, told me 1 year ago, oh, we have found about 200 photos by Macdonald in the archives, and are you interested? I said, of course I'm interested to have. So you have some of those photos on table number 7 in the exhibition, but we can see a few here as well. Let's start with Ibn Tulun, one of the most emblematic mosques of Cairo. That's the next one, please. As it was at the beginning of the 20th century. If any of you is a specialist of early photography, I'm still wondering. I still want to know what kind of camera I was using in 1908 to produce those photos. He takes photos of Islamic buildings, many, probably because he wants to know the city where the Arabian Nights were written in the 14th century. And here you have one of the Fatimid gates of Cairo. Then we have in the center